Hey, good afternoon. This is Lawrence McKendall with Scooberlicious Ultimate, and this is the third installment of my interview show. And we've got some background barking here, so we're going to get the full element of this interview process. I have a very engaging and exciting session I'm eager to jump into, and just a little bit overview about what Scooberlicious is about. I look to get a variety of different people who are in the ultimate frisbee community and really highlight their background, what they're doing in the community, and really amplify what makes the sport really cool. So on that note, my third guest of this infant series is Manisha Daryani.
Yep.
Yeah, she let me off the hook here. She's like, no, this is not what we practice. So let me do the slide over here and introduce and say good afternoon.
Hi.
Hey, I'm glad that she took the time. She took the time to come from San Francisco. She just won a national championship for Ultimate Frisbee. No, it's the Winter League Championship.
So close, so close.
Like, you know what? Exactly.
I know, it's just on the same level.
Exactly. High five to that one. So she actually corrected me that she actually was not a participant, but excellence
I was on
follows
the
excellence.
Team. Okay, come on. Now you're just diminishing the role. I was on the
follows
team.
Excellence.
Shout out to Sugar and Puffs. Way to win Winter League.
Very good. So I was going to dwell on that, but I wanted to get into something that Slap. Oh, by the way, Slap is your nickname. How did you get this?
So I went to UCSD for college, and I walked on to the softball team down there, and I am a lefty. And if you are familiar with baseball at all, lefty batters are usually called slappers. The idea is that people who are smaller, like myself, can actually just sort of choke up on the bat and slap the ball down and then try and outrun to first base. And so I was a slapper my freshman year. And when I joined the team my sophomore year, our captain actually was a former softball player. And they tell you, write a fun fact. And I said, I'm a slapper. And so I think she came up with the idea of just shortening it down to Slap.
Right on. That's
and so
cool.
And it seemed to have stuck.
Well, I met Slap during Beware Health, and I'm like, I know homegirl. I know of her, and I've seen her running around. So it's very rare that you see people of noted caliber, at least from the female part of Beware Health, that I was like, oh, this is great. She's on my team. I'm definitely, and she's a professional smack talker. She was talking hella smack. It was good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like you can take it.
But she's not bad enough. She went to the old jokes immediately. I'm like, that's so wrong, taking advantage of the elderly.
But she did not.
Fruit. Exactly. She went right there. So I said, you know what? We need to connect and talk a little bit more about her experience. So one of the things that Slap mentioned too, that she's a coach and the coach of the Pie Queens at Cal. And why is that dear to your heart? What's happening there?
I've been coaching for 6 years. I have found it to be one of the most rewarding and fulfilling and yet frustrating experiences of my life. And I can't think of anything more exciting than to be able to inspire and teach the next generations of women's ultimate who are going to be running circles around, and actually already are running circles around me.
Exactly.
And that it's such to even think that you are doing anything, even small, to be a part of it, I think is really a wonderful feeling. And I can't encourage it enough. If you have the opportunity to coach, no matter the level, you get that reward, irrespective of whether it's college, high school, elementary school, middle school.
Absolutely.
There is something really enjoyable about being a part of a process where you teach, where you see someone fail 7 times and then get it right the 8th time. And that realization, and you can see it. There's an external reaction to a player when something that they have been working on finally clicks. And I love that moment.
Well, it's satisfying for a coach too. I mean, you're taking it in, but yes, for them.
It's satisfying as a coach because it means you're not going to break another clipboard, having told them 7 times to do this one thing. So it's like, okay, now I can move on to something else as a coach.
Right, and get a new clipboard. So that's good. Well, we had the Pie Queens. I get to co-coach at the Bentley High School, and we had the Pie Queens come and do some instruction. And in their wake, we got great instruction and some new nicknames for some of the players, and it really, brought our team to another level. And they're a class act, and it's great that I had a coach here to talk a little bit about. So How do you take a group of players at the skill level of a college team and make them better?
I thought you were starting easy.
Okay, we can
no,
go.
No. I'm kidding. One of the coolest things about college, and honestly, the college scene is changing. When I played, people came into the sport having never heard of Frisbee.
Right.
And they came into college, and so your learning curve was incredibly high. I mean, you were talking about people who never had picked up a Frisbee becoming their best thrower on the team after a year. And so we're starting to see us move away from that. You're starting to see, obviously, with so much more involvement on the elementary, middle, and high school levels, that these players are not coming in with some background, with some experience, with some skill sets, which I think as a coach sort of changes your mentality.
Sure.
Cal has a mix of players who have never played, but they've played other sports. So they have a athletic background. Right. And as a coach, your job is to help translate their skill set into something that they can understand. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll give the example of like basketball, and we talk about how to set a mark. And I said, you guys remember this? You guys remember doing this in basketball? Do you remember doing those side shuffles with basketball? Or I'll make comments about soccer, and I'll talk about positioning. And so translating that, I think, is really helpful for those who've never experienced the sport. For those who have, and Cal's been fortunate that we're starting to get some players now who have a prior background in the sport. Your job is to now figure out where they're at, what habits they've learned, how do you either integrate some of those habits or break other habits.
Sure.
And so I think it's an interesting and fun mesh now, where there isn't any one size fits all. I think any college coach would come in and be like, here's what I have to deal with. And while we can say generally and conceptually we're dealing with the same things, when you break down the nitty-gritty of like the details of the players that you're dealing with, it's such a as applied process based on who you have, and again, more importantly, I think the willingness of the players to be pushed. That's a huge component of it. You need, I'm of the opinion that the coach should do what the players ask them to do, not the other way around. So I've always asked at the beginning of the season, how far do you want me to push you? And I make this point not to be mean, but to say, as a coach, we are in a position to challenge our players. But we also need to understand what is best for our players. And in many ways, those players do actually know what's best for them. Mm-hmm. Some players will tell me outright, I can't be yelled at. Other players will tell you, I need to be yelled at. And as a coach, your job is to be able to integrate that information that you're getting and then respond in kind, respond accordingly. And so I think as a coach, you have to wear a lot of hats. With this one player, hey, listen, she made a mistake. She doesn't need to hear it. The other one, she needs to hear it. And you have to start to really balance that and give those players what they need. Because in the end, if you give them that, then you start to get the best out of them. But again, in line with, you still have to challenge them.
No, it's interesting. So with that same approach of trying to elicit that feedback from players, is that relevant at all levels? Or you have a mature set that they are able to tell you versus high school? You challenge them regardless?
Well, I mean, I think as you get younger, they're still figuring out what works for them, right? I think you're correct. There's a maturity level as you get older. People really start to understand, this is what I respond well to, this is what I don't respond well to. I think as those who are younger players are still figuring it out for themselves, and I think that you have to tread more softly as a coach. And so you do become more skill-oriented. You become more oriented in terms of social skills for those players, right. Because that'll help set that foundation. As those players say, come from you to me, you've set those foundations so that by the time they get to that college level, by the time they get to the point where they've hit that maturity level, and again, that desire to keep playing, that's where you can really start to say, okay, you want to keep playing? How do we make you better? How do we get the best out of you? What does that process really look like? Because again, for younger kids, sometimes they don't really have a lot of the option of like, my parents put me in this.
Of course.
Exactly.
You're babysitting.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're babysitting.
No, but I mean, it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
Put me in.
Yeah. But especially you get to college, where you're getting, and then even high school, I think, where you're getting players who are saying, I am choosing to spend my time doing this. I am choosing. Yeah. And so again, with that, I think it is correct that there are different it's different.
Sure.
For younger versus as you get to older.
So there's a couple things I want to go to. When I'm coaching high school, I look at it as I'm trying to grow leaders and good sportsmanship, and at the same time you're coaching up an athlete. But at the same time you're teaching them to learn, because there's a lot of negatives, not negatives, but there's a lot of times you're throwing stuff away. You're learning, and rather than hanging your head, this is a great way to build. You're getting your butt beat, but this is a great learning experience. Step back. Why are you getting your butt beat? You're probably being beat by a really good team. What can you glean from that? You may, as a coach, may go, I don't like that, I'm going to break up. So, but the other thing I want to tell you, as far as the leaders go, I try to put even the lower players in a position as a leader that they can address the team, call out the force, call out the zone, whatever, so they can be in front of them and talk and address. So when they come to the next level, they're not viewed as like, I played in the B team, but they had the opportunity to address and be a leader. So I try to look at we are growing young men and women that are positive, walking away as ultimate as a platform for a larger.
I'm going to slightly disagree with what you're saying.
Please.
And because
this interview's over right now. May I approach the? Yeah. The witness is hostile. Okay. All right. Please.
No, I mean I'm going to agree, and then I'm going to add some nuance to it. I think you're correct because when you started describing what you were describing, I said, well, that's so much of what I do. You're building leaders. Right. But there's two components to leadership. There's leadership as a member of a team, and I think there's some component of like building captains or building those types of leaders. But then there's building leaders in your community, asking members of your team. I'm not talking based on skill set. I'm saying members of your team to be confident in their everyday life, to be assertive when needed, to be deferential, to hear, because those are the skills we are teaching as part of Frisbee.
Sure.
And when I talk about building leaders in my team, I say, am I helping set a platform for you for when they go out in their everyday life? I mean, like, honestly, I see my girls do 7 hours a week. How many hours are in a week? I don't even know. Terrible at math. Okay, 7, 24. That is a lot of time where we're not seeing them.
Okay.
And so the question then becomes, in that 7 hours, what impact, if any, can you make for those 90% of the time when you're not seeing them? And again, I don't look at it in terms of like I pick and choose based on a skill level or my lower or higher tiers. I'm earnestly trying to view my players as people and not based on their use on the field.
Okay, I don't disagree to the point. Yeah, you're saying a lot. Well, maybe I didn't express it.
That's why I'm like nuancing it. I'm nuancing it. But in terms of like, when you, I think for high school and for college, so much of where you're getting to this point where these kids now have their personality. They have that, now they're starting to really set that path where they're headed to next in life. I mean, there's a trajectory of like Frisbee. Am I setting up my players to want to play on Fury? Sure. But am I setting up my players to be confident women?
Absolutely. We're starting the same thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is, and in the end, I mean, like everything else is gravy. You know.
Well, I've played a number of team sports where that wasn't the tenet. Like, we're going to grow leaders and confident people. I see coaches that like, you know what? It's scorched earth. It's my way, the highway. And if you leave skittish and you didn't work in my system, you're disposable.
It was on you.
Exactly.
It was on you.
Quite disposable.
Right. And I think it's on the coach. Yeah. I truly believe it's on the coach. I think that as coaches, if there cannot and should not be an instance where you say, I can't work with this player. I can't help this player. Exactly. I think that requires a great deal of reflection as a coach to say, no, I need to find the right method. I need to find the right hook for this player. There cannot and shouldn't be lost causes.
So just as a side, so the high school I went to, there's a coach that's nominated for the Hall of Fame for the high school. But I said, it's very interesting that there's no players within his experience that are part of you would think he would have a rich base of, look at all the Hall of Famers that came out of his tenure, but there's none. It's just him. I'm like, That's an interesting thing. Why? Because you coach a long period of time doesn't make you a great coach. It makes you maybe because he.
I would never comment on another reason.
Right, exactly. So I'm just saying that he worked with fear, and it was not like, you know what, I'm going to grow young men and young women to be solid players.
I mean, I'll tell you. Forgive me for I grew up in a system of fear. I grew up in that system, and I thrived in it. I'll be honest. I was one of the players.
Some people love it.
I was one of the players who, when I joined Fury, was like, "Y'all need to yell at me some more because nobody's yelling at me right now." And
did you recognize that?
Or
were you raised in it, and that's what became the air you breathe?
Oh no! I mean, like, let me be very clear. I'm bad cop on the Pie Queens. I am the coach who gets angry. I'm the coach who gets upset. I'm the coach who yells. But I'm also the coach that believes unyieldingly in their potential. I am, for better or worse, an absolute optimist. And so one can be upset at a player. One can yell at a player, but can absolutely do it out of love. It's like, in some ways, I almost feel like they're parents. Which is a terrible thing, and I don't even want to think about that. But in some ways, because you have to, and it's something as kids we learn too. Like, why were our parents yelling at us? Why were they so mean? Why were they so tough on us? Because they believed it.
They had your back.
They wanted you. Right. They wanted you to fulfill the potential they believe you have.
Right.
And that's a frustrating position sometimes to be in as a child. I mean, I grew up in that environment too. But it's also one when you take that step back and realize where it's coming from, the purpose behind it, even perhaps if the messaging isn't perfect or the mechanism of that message isn't perfect, understanding the purpose of it, I think goes a long way.
And I think for the most, it's at the Pie Queens, if you're taking the information that they're able, different people are coached in different levels, that intention from the coach going, you know what, they yell, but I understand where they're coming from, as opposed to like it's all about them and it's an ego versus like
screaming.
You're like going,
I feel like I would like to hope that 90% of the time when I yell at my girls, they understand.
It's like exactly like when I said,
you could ask them yourself.
I will make fun of you if you mess up. I'm going to tease you, but it's all from love, and it's all part of like, you understand the intention. So no, absolutely.
But you can still create a really fun dynamic as a result, where players understand that you are pushing them not to be malicious, but because you truly are saying, I believe you can do better. And again, for a player, and I think I can speak for myself, and hopefully I can also externalize, that's sometimes really frustrating because you're trying so hard and it's not working. Why is she still telling me to do it? But my sincerest hope is that at the end of the day, they're appreciative of it. Because it's, like I said, it's never malicious. It's never about, I need this. It's, I believe this in this for you. I believe in this for you.
And that's what's cool. And that's what, I mean, part of this discussion, everybody has their different interpretations, but I think all the coaches, there's a commonality of that, we want the best. And we've checked our ego. We want you to exceed. We may yell at you, we may cajole you, whatever, but it comes from a heart of like, hey, we want you to
because it's, I started this by saying it is the coolest thing to witness when a player even touches that potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
And oftentimes it's very fleeting.
It could be.
It's very fleeting. But when they touch it, and you see it, not for yourself, but for them, and you see it, the light turns on, a little ding. Whoa.
So I would say to that, what I find is interesting when my son's playing soccer, did you see me score the goal or whatever? I said, you know what? I saw the small little nuances of your game that I like. I mean, that's fine. If you missed a goal, you kick, that's fine. But there are little bitty things that I'm looking at. That's that's really satisfying when you can go.
And the girls will tell you that. I feel like sometimes they're upset that I don't celebrate as much with like a score.
Right.
And if I call a timeout, I usually don't talk about the score. I talk about what led up to it.
Exactly.
And
that's the beauty of it when you're so immersed in the sport where you can able to see the nice, beautiful gray areas.
I mean, it's not even, but it's like the beauty of the movement.
Of course, that's
and so much of it is like process versus outcome.
Right. That's what I'm calling the gray area, the process.
Yeah,
exactly.
The process.
Well put. Exactly.
But it's a really, like I said, it's been a wonderful experience. I will say again, I highly recommend those who are interested, even peripherally, at imparting some knowledge
Yes.
on some youngins. I would highly recommend it.
And their Bata Barrier Disc Association is in need of coaches.
Definitely.
So this is a testimonial and sort of
Yeah,
unsolicited advertisement to please
reach out.
Yeah,
I'm on the board. Reach out.
There you go. And there's clinics for coaches if you don't know, but it's a nice organization, and they want to champion the cause, as you can see on the coaches. So let's segue into Fury.
Yeah.
You're a badass. I mean, the Barrie is a hotbed of ultimate frisbee, and Fury for women's ultimate, and for ultimate in general, they're the badass on the block, which is good. So maybe I'm building.
I think there's some. We're in company. I'll say that.
I would agree. That's a humble response. I'm looking from as far as when Fury comes up, it's rare air. That there's certain teams that are in that. Yes, you accompany rare air, and you have high standards.
Yeah.
So talk about your experience. Talk about getting on the team, maintaining consistency of excellence, because it's one thing to win it. It's another thing to be there and try to maintain the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And that's where the challenge always comes in. But yeah, wax poetic about Fury and your
So I joined the team in 2008. I had moved up to the Bay Area for law school, and I had been playing with San Diego Safari up until that point. And I'll be honest, I was actually really unenthusiastic about the transition. I really enjoyed playing with Safari.
Why? What was that?
Because it was the women I had grown up playing with.
Were they 2 steps down from Fury? Because
that's the thing. It wasn't. Okay. I mean, I don't think. I know I didn't join Fury with the idea or notion or dream of I want to be a national champion. Mm-hmm. I joined a team and with the intent of being a part of a group of women that I enjoyed being around. And I had been playing with Safari at that point for 6 years, and having learned the sport, grown up in that sport, women I had coached, women who had been in my same class at UCSD, that was really hard to leave. There's a component of being competitive and of wanting to excel, certainly, absolutely, and I do think I had that. I'd like to think so because they took me on the team, but that move was really tough because I was leaving one family to join another that I didn't really know much about.
It's interesting you say family.
Okay. I knew of Fury's reputation, obviously. At that point they had won, it was 2006, 2005? They'd at least won 2 by the time I was joining in 2008. I knew these women because when you play in the club division in the early... I'm not that old, but even in the early 2000s, our community was still small enough where everybody did know each other. Everybody knew each other. So you knew these women. You knew the aura that was Fury in the early 2000s, and you also knew that they were clearly building something. And so, of course, that's alluring as a young player who's kind of hey, guys, slap. There's obviously an allure to that as well, and so I was really glad to make the team in 2008 because also it gave me the opportunity to go to Worlds that year, which in and of itself is a wonderful experience. I had actually had the opportunity to play in 2006 Worlds. I went to Perth with Mischief.
Cool.
In 2006, so I had a taste of what Worlds was like.
So before we segue into Worlds and that, what was the culture? Was it just a natural? Okay, you talked about family. You're moving one family to another. Once you got on the team, was it like, oh my God, we're eating red meat every day? And whether vegetarian or not. But was there a distinct cultural change, or was it just you were already in a natural arc of being good? Was it just a natural continuum, or was it so distinct from what you were playing, who you were playing on, and going to Fury?
In some ways similar, in some ways distinct. I made that comment earlier. I joined Fury in 2008, and I remember going to Bryn Martiniere, who was the captain that year, saying Bryn, you need to yell at me. Bryn had played in Safari before, so she and I had grown up in that system. And I was like, y'all need to yell at me. I need to know what I'm doing wrong. And this was a team that externally, and then as I was starting to really immerse myself in this program, was very different vibe, different flow of things. I mean, you had these established, wonderful women who were playing, who were, in some ways, their names preceded themselves, and you were in that group, and you were there, and I was sort of like, hey, Jody. Yeah. Hey, Alicia. Hey, Robin. Cool. And you were just in that group. And so as a young player, and I think even some of my younger players would say the same thing today, walking into that group and being said, you're now with us,
right,
is humbling,
yeah,
for one. But it's also very inspiring. Again, you talk about this, desire for excellence. Fury, in some ways, solicits that externally by bringing in these players, but also facilitates that internally amongst the players.
Cool.
And so again, if you talk about that, you can be so much better. I think really came from those early years of Fury. You can be excellent. You can be, this dynamic cutter. You can do this. You can do that. That was a fun environment to grow in. 2008 was such a whirlwind year in so many ways. I was still in law school at the same time, being a part of this team where it just requires so much commitment and trying to also balance life that I wanted to head in a very specific direction for, was challenging, but it was a really, really it was a transition that I was glad I took. And from 2008, that year, to then continuing to stay on the program, I have enjoyed watching an evolution. Because to your earlier question, Fury developed a reputation for continuing to win. But I'll certainly tell you that we didn't win the same year. We didn't win the same way twice. We didn't.
That's interesting.
There was a lot of movement, strategy movement, cultural movement, and that is what I have found to be the most fun aspect of being a part of this team, is to see it evolve.
It's fluid.
Yeah, there's so much fluidity in it. I mean, you look at 2008, and we were thinking about losing all these players. A bunch of them stayed on in 2009. And then honestly, up until 10 is not where we saw the real mass exodus of our.
Why was that?
Because for those women who had been on the team from the early 2000s to 2010, it was a good stopping point. It was a really good stopping point. It was the year that the team went to Prague, and so we saw a true turnover in roster that year, and then in 2011 as well, which required in many ways an evolution in the way the team actually was too. I mean, I don't think people realize when you look at the turnover of roster, pre-2011 to post-2010 and pre-2010, there's a substantial change in the roster. And the question I think that people really need to ask is, what helped that transition when you lose so many phenomenal players?
Right.
I'm not saying lost. I mean, these women retired and they had earned the right to be able to walk away with their heads held high because they had done some amazing things for the sport by the time they retired. And the question really was, what does that mantle look like now that they've left it? Who fills it? How do you fill it? And so I loved that transition year, those two transition years between 10 and 11, where we, in many ways, reinvented ourselves. We reinvented how we did line calling. We reinvented how we approached the game. And that was a really fun time to be a part of that team, because it was you were seeing a process now. You were seeing a maturity. It's very easy. I think a lot of people will always say it's very easy to get complacent after you win a lot.
Sure. What they talk about when you summit Everest, everybody dies on the way down.
Right. You're so excited.
Exactly. We're here, we've arrived. But no, on the contrary.
Yeah.
This is where, though.
And to the extent that it's been wonderful to be around women who are still as driven to continue to not only excel for themselves, but for the sport. Because, again, let's also acknowledge that there is great competition during this time period. There's no off year. It wasn't like a downward drop in who we were playing. I mean, look at Riot. My God, I know that people can look at Riot and say, well, they have never won, but to have a team to be so consistently
part of the conversation.
For so many years, and again, and also a team that also has reinvented themselves quite a bit. That really needs to get a lot of credit as well. People really like to focus on the end result. Who won? But who won doesn't tell you the evolution of the sport. Who won doesn't tell you the storyline.
Well, what do I say? What really tells the character of a champion when you can step back and look at your competition going, you know what? Look, there's the people around us. There's some like Riot. You're acknowledging Riot, and you're cognizant of like, look at this is a really good team that should be exalted and definitely recognized.
Yeah, so I mean that. Yeah, you lead into 2012. 2012 was the downfall.
So hold on here. So what's interesting is you have to reinvent yourself. Can you, from a layperson standpoint, I'm going to pull stuff out of the air. You know, we started going to predominantly a host act, or we predominantly started doing such and such, or the line calls. What does that look? What do you talk about? You distinctly point in different areas. What does that mean?
I mean, I think it's interesting because I look back as a coach and think about what we did and what we changed, and I think that's part of my process today as a coach. I look at the evolution and say, what actually did change there? Personnel changed, but yet we still won. So,
but you had the tenet of excellence. That's the one thing is like that. That tenet never went away.
Certainly, but you ask Brute Squad, you ask Scandal, you ask Showdown. They have tenets of excellence too. Like, let's not diminish the scope and breadth and depth of the women's division. All teams have a strive for excellence. They wouldn't be at the level that they are at unless they strove for excellence.
Sure, but it went beyond. I'm talking about as a layperson.
Yeah,
it went beyond simply.
But I mean, like, it's so funny to say it's excellence. I mean, because like there were so many years. There's a number of years where you like crawl into nationals, and there's other years where you just kind of like galloped into nationals, and then you have this tournament that again either writes your storyline as a happy ending, or it's a tragedy. And
I would debate that. Maybe I want to say post-mortem, I can debate going, was it really a tragedy? No, was you walking off the field and you're like, we had higher expectations, but you can objectively step back and go, no, we came in injured, we exceeded our whatever.
Yeah,
so was it truly, because you said there was a drop-off 2013?
No, I made a joke. I'm sorry.
Okay, good.
Humor.
Okay, good. Dark humor. It's fine. We do dark humor here. So
it's the year Fury didn't win.
It's okay. No, but that's fine.
Clouds.
Yeah. But that's part of the thing. So you got to like part of the look at the Giants. Every other year they were due to win a championship, and all of a sudden reality came in.
I don't know if it's a reality thing. I think that evolution of this sport, of the women's division, has seen so much parity. And also because of the format change.
The base is widening.
Yeah, but the format change has also contributed.
So what do you mean?
So, when we switched out of Sarasota, when the Triple Crown format began...
USA Ultimate.
This is USA Ultimate talk now. It dictated... Before, we chose what tournaments we wanted to go to. We chose where we wanted to go to, who we wanted to really see, and our schedule. The Triple Crown took that away. It told you had to play these certain tournaments, you had to play against these certain teams, and the way that they stretched it out, and the nationals format changing as well, I think has actually contributed a lot more than we give it credit for as it relates to looking at the divisions and looking at the evolution of our sport. So I mean, I guess you want like specific examples, or? Well,
I want you to think about me as a layperson, because some of the stuff is most of my head's been around men's ultimate, and I've admired you guys from afar. I've watched your practices, like going, this is how the badasses play. It's serious stuff. Like, no, this is
really?
like,
you don't see us turfing it like 7 times?
You know what? No, I've watched you guys play. I'm like going, people are walking by going, no, you need to recognize what you see here. It's not a couple of cute women throwing it. They're playing hardcore practice. So, and I'm talking as a fan and as an unwashed or sort of ignorant. So, and some of the people who might eventually watch may wonder. So if you can impart any sort of thing that you think is like, illuminate.
Again, there's these external factors, I think, that need to be discussed when you're talking about consistency or dynasty, or whatever term that you'd like to use as a layperson. And So, in many ways, here's an example. Like, one could argue Fury's success at Sarasota was dictated by having such strong handlers. When you play in the wind, if you have a team that can play in that wind, you are going to be successful. Now, what does that say about your team or program as a whole? I don't know. And again, because you're taking one factor and saying, how did that factor in? Now, let's look at Triple Crown. Triple Crown and the new USA Nationals format requires less games than we ever had before. Before, you were playing 9 games, I think, 9 or 10 games at Nationals. And so when you're talking about 9 to 10 games over the course of 4 days, you are dealing with fatigue. You are dealing with a far different strategy for line calling. And you are also dealing with just reps of so many different chances to screw up. So that older national format where you played your pool, then you go into power pools, and then you go into a bracket, one actually, in my opinion, offered you a better insight as to the depth and breadth of a team.
So the older format.
The older format.
Okay.
What the newer format does is
USA Ultimate Champion,
this
Triple Crown.
Now Triple Crown / the USA Nationals format does is that you play a pool and then you immediately go into a bracket. But the top teams don't actually cross over, which is what the older format used to do. The older format would say, well, wait a second, are these teams really your top best 4 teams? Let's find out. Let's give them a crossover power pool to really get a sense. Like a good example is that, the last 2 years, we've never seen Scandal, like in the bracket. Or a better example is Fury never crossed over with a Brute Squad the last 2 years in the bracket. Fury and Riot ended up seeing each other in the bracket. And if you look at the regular season results, Fury had done pretty okay. We lost. But we'd done pretty okay against Brute Squad. But we never saw them at Nationals. And I'm not diminishing Brute Squad's win. Please, let me be very, very clear. I'm not at all taking away from what I've really enjoyed watching Brute Squad's last 2, and honestly, a much longer evolution for that team to be at the point where they're at. I admire that team a lot. But that said, Brute won Nationals having never played Fury.
Where's Brute Squad?
Boston.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's fine. You need to know them now. They're so good. They're so good.
Yes.
And so when you look at that and you say, what does this Nationals format tell you? Well, it tells you who can play the format the best. Who can play really what it comes down to 3 games over relative 2 days, the best.
Right.
And so as a result, I think you're seeing teams respond to that format in different ways. We started to see this happen, I think, in 2014, where you saw these big moves happening. You see it in the men's division, right? The big moves of so-and-so moving to this team and so-and-so moving to this team. Okay. And I truly believe a lot of that is a result of the format. The format incentivizes that movement. It incentivizes...
that's a byproduct. I don't think they did that. I don't think they foresaw.
I don't think.
That.
No. I don't think USAU. I don't think. I'm not putting a.
So we'll move on to another topic. But I want to see what do you think USA's Ultimate's rationale? Because they dictated where the play, where the tournaments were played, where you're going to play. Was that to get control of the venues?
No, I mean, if you're talking about promoting a sport, consistency is key, and being able to promote in advance is key. Where the old format, we would choose our schedule of where does Fury want to play? Do we want to go to Solstice? Do we want to go to Colorado Cup this year? Those decisions would be made, in April, May
at a club level.
Yeah, right. And those tournaments are in June, July.
Right.
And so if you're USAU and you're wanting to promote these tournaments, you can't actually promote those tournaments because you don't know who's going to come. But what the Triple Crown does is that it reserves these teams so that, again, if you're talking from a promotional level, you can, 6 months before the fact, 3 months before the fact, build these storylines in so that when you get Evan and all these guys on... ESPN talking about the sport, there's a storyline there that has now been built in partly through that format.
No, I do marketing and advertising and graphic design. It's very interesting. I've never had it spelled out so succinctly what the benefit of the Triple Crown. I understood that as a player. It sounded good, and we wanted to get in that echelon. But from sheer marketing, being able to say yes, building a storyline, and yes, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But thank you very much on that. So, is there another topic you want to talk about with Fury? Because I want to talk about a number of things.
There's so much to talk about.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about. One of the things I want to make sure I don't run out of power on my phone. It's one of the idiosyncrasies of working with Facebook Live. But hi, we're happen to be in downtown Oakland at the Revolution Cafe, and we have the benefit of having the cafe to ourselves at the moment. Pretty funky place. They've got jazz on Friday and open mic night on Sundays, and they got great chicken and waffles when the restaurant is open. I want to thank Dow.
You're holding out on me.
Well, you know what? We get Dow. We get Dow in here. We can fire some up, but I just want to let you know that. So anyway, it's at Revolution
cool spot,
Cafe.
Yes. It's actually a cool spot.
Yeah, down the street from West Oakland BART and across the street from the main post office in Oakland. That said, so the Olympics and ultimate frisbee. Do you think it's going to come to fruition?
I do.
In what's your feeling? In what inception? What form of ultimate will appear in Olympics?
I think this is. Well, I do think beach ultimate. I am of the opinion. I'm going to support that USAU is also doing this as well. That beach ultimate may be your stepping stone in. Partly because of the marketing and logistics of it.
Okay.
If you're talking about the Summer Olympics, and the Olympics is about being able to provide venues for these sports, one of the cool things about beach is that there is a pre-existing venue already set up for us in beach volleyball. So if you're talking about promoting or marketing the sport to the Olympics, I agree with those.
With the minimal impact. You really turn on a dime.
Yeah, right. And I agree with the many people who think, well, let's make it the easiest for the Olympics to do this,
right.
Which is not having to build a new venue.
Right.
And so that's, in and of itself, of course, a positive selling point.
Sure.
I am sincerely hopeful that it can be in a co-ed format. And again, I agree with those who argue that this is such a unique caveat to our sport. That is watchable and is, of course, entertaining.
You're talking about the beach element.
The beach element, okay. But co-ed beach is too. Also. Because, there's always that question in grass where sometimes you can feel like there's certain teams where the women get lost. But when you're talking about a beach format with less players, you don't get the luxury of losing your women in the field.
That's an interesting thing, because I want to share my input that I think for the more Cirque du Soleil element, that beach ultimate, and yes, the impact too, you're able to spin on a dime, that I think it's more exciting. I think it lends itself to co-ed, but it's interesting you say that the women won't get lost versus on a field. It makes complete sense. So that's sort of my prediction, that I think it'll be the caveat, the cachet or the entree would be beach, because there's a circus element to it, a novelty that comes with it, versus a field sport, which can look like, isn't it soccer? Whereas when you,
I don't even
so I'm
know.
looking from a marketing standpoint.
I mean, let's not diminish. I love grass. I do love beach too. Though. But I think to the extent that if you are
for a layperson watching it,
and again, if we're talking about like what is as a marketing perspective, and I'm not arguing the merits of grass or beach. I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm not advocating single gender versus co-ed. I'm speaking purely from a marketing perspective.
Me too. Right. Absolutely.
And so,
I think if I was listening to Ultimate's pitch, that's a compelling tack to take what you just mentioned.
Yeah, so. I mean, so we had the U.S. Beach Open. Chuck, Kindred, and myself got to announce some games there, actually, which was really, really fun.
One's the voice, Lepler's the voice of Ultimate, and Kindred is the moose. The moose of ultimate frisbee. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, yes, I've mentioned that too.
It was actually really fun. It was fun to announce 4-on-4 ultimate. It was really fun to watch as well, and I hope people who were watching it thought the same. Right. And so credit a lot to, by the way, the organizers of that tournament for trying to help promote. Very specifically move towards this this concept that we keep talking about. What about ultimate in the Olympics? What about and you have the TDs being like, all right, I'm going to put it together. I'm going to make it happen. And build it and they will come. And lo and behold, I thought that tournament was really, really well done.
Awesome. This is cool stuff. So I always like to spar with like, what do you look in your crystal ball? I'm always interested, what gets someone's perspective, especially a woman's perspective. Like, where does you think it's going to land and for what reason? So thank you for sharing. So, career highlights. What when you go to bed at night, what is that one video that goes through your head consistently?
Usually how I screwed up.
That might be, that might very be. That might be the one that scars you, cuts the deepest groove.
It does.
There's got to be something that's positive, that's like, yes.
No,
it might even be subtle. I made a great down the field. It might be something very subtle.
I think before we got started, one of the things I was mentioning was that 2012 Worlds in Japan. That is a career highlight. We lost. But it's a career highlight to be in an environment. I mean, the reason why I think people are very frustrated with USAU but really jazzed with USAU is because USAU is talking about promoting the sport. They want butts in the stands, right? We went to Worlds and had 3,000-4,000 people in the stands.
Awesome.
And there is...
That's satisfying.
It's not even satisfying to... People will tell you, you have to cut it out, right? Gotta go quiet. It has to be quiet in your head in those moments.
Really? But it's white noise.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, if you have to be, because this was a pro-Japan crowd. Let's be very clear. This was a very pro-Japan crowd. And to play your game, where if you were to take a step back and every throw you slightly miss, there's a big cheer.
Wow.
Every,
sure.
In cut, there's like, gasp. You had to cut it out.
So let me ask you before you see your story, because I like where you're going. Have you played any other team sports before that? So I've played in situations where you go out in a crowd and ultimately it's very, very rare that you have maybe a handful of people watching something.
But they're very good hecklers, I have to tell you.
That's true.
We may have some of the best hecklers.
But to be in that environment where you've got, whether it's biased or not, you have that many people in an ultimate venue. It's very rare and it's got to be very satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's satisfying. It was overwhelming. It was awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
It was humbling. Yeah. It was memorable. And I think I made this comment to you earlier, where you walked out of that game almost sad that someone had to lose.
I love how you phrase that, and that's a very satisfying way. Like, yes, someone had to lose this one.
Yeah, because that game, when you talk about the quality of that game, the highs, the lows, the runs, the early lead we took, Japan roaring back at the end, that long point that lasted like 13 minutes before they broke again. God, I remember that. I remember that with such fondness. I remember that with such pride. I take very near and dear the opportunity to say I represented Team USA. As a woman of color, I think it's a big deal. And to be in a moment in Athletic Forum where you are playing for something greater than yourself.
Sure.
But also you're playing with your friends. There is no better feeling to be in that moment, even in that field of battle where you lose. To know that you did it with these women that I have admired, respect, I'm in awe of every day. There is no better feeling than that being in that moment and living in that moment.
Right. There's a guy I play Ultimate with, and he's like, where people's tails sort of curl up when it's really high competition, he was able to sort of step back and go, this is not pickup, this is not practice, this is not a small tournament. We're like, this is a badass team we're playing against, and this is like awesome. So all the stuff you're measuring, like a pro Japan crowd, and everything, every mistake was amplified with cheers. Were you able to step back and go, this is post after, but in the measure where you're like, this is what it's about. This is awesome.
In that moment, and I think people will tell you, I'm a very analytical player. I'm very much in a point, and I'm also, I have like this weird photographic memory thing. So I am reliving points as I'm playing points. I am analyzing things as things are happening. So I actually didn't really take a big perspective look as to where we were till I saw the photos afterwards. And then I watched the video afterwards, and I thought, I can't believe I was in that.
No, absolutely.
I couldn't. Yeah, it was so weird. It was so surreal almost to watch that game and to be like, that I was there. I was doing that. I did that kind of cool thing. I did that really terrible thing too. I really did that terrible thing as well.
So this is the sort of the thing that sort of the questions I ask is that you were amongst in these situations where I could say I played at like hat tournaments, I went to sectionals or whatever. You were in a setting that was like great. I mean, bad, good, flame out, or excitement. You were there amongst the conversation, like you earned the right, like the Buffalo Bills lost 4 times in a row. But they have to win. They go to the Super Bowl to experience the Super Bowl. And so this is one of the things like, wow, play at Wolves at that high level.
Yeah, I mean,
you were there.
It is a cherished memory that I am so really grateful that I was fortunate to be a part of.
So when you say, so how often do you know, some people go, you say pass the salt, and they're like, did I mention I'm with Fury? I'm like, just pass the salt. But somebody, how often do you find yourself dropping, did I tell you about Fury?
No. I actually, no.
Good for you. I mean, I'm saying jokingly, but do you have an opportunity to, when you say with Fury, how many people go, oh, they have no, or how many people go,
can I tell you a really cool story, actually? I'll tell you a really cool story. I was a law student. I'm a lawyer now, and I was doing a competition in law school because Lord knows I'm a competitive person, so I'll find competition in law school as well. And we were at a competition in Florida, law school competition in Florida, and my coach of the team that I was on, it was a moot court competition. It's where you get to argue. That's what I do best.
Very good.
Was talking to a member of the Florida team, and somehow Frisbee came up, and the gentleman asked my coach, "What team does she play for?" And he said, "Fury." And that guy's like, "What? Are you serious?"
Yeah, no, exactly.
And my coach goes back and he goes, "Are you famous or something?"
Yeah, no, that's when people recognize, it's like the needle gets ripped off. Wait a second.
Let me tell you, that's cool. But I'll be very honest. I think it's the coolest thing just to find someone that says I play Frisbee. Because in the end, being a part of the sport is more important than the team you play for.
Yeah, sure, good for you. No, I agree. I'm fascinated when you see a disc fly and you see someone throw a flick. I'm like, I can go throw with this person.
I can go throw with this person.
The flick is a telltale sign. Oh, you know this more. Yeah. So I'm with you. I understand.
That barbecue backhand. I'm like, oh, I don't know.
but still, it's just one of those things that's rare to go. It's just a cool thing. You rolled around. You were a member of the community family, and you experienced a lot of Highland stuff. And it was so. When I first met you at Buerho, I'm like, girl balls. She's a baller. So it was very cool. So this is good. So get your memory. What's on your playlist these days? What are the young kids playing these days?
I'm not young, man.
Well, you're younger than I am, so yes.
What is on my playlist today? I really like the radio. I don't have
that one song you've played 20 times in a row.
I don't have like the what are the playlist things where you can
talking about Spotify.
Yeah, I don't have those things. I like listening to the radio. I like hearing what's being played at a given moment. So my tastes kind of run with it too, where I'm like, I'm thinking of this song, like the new Linkin Park song that just came out. Like I was like, I'm kind of jamming to that song. It's just like random. I'm such an eclectic music listener. I can listen to almost anything at any time.
All right. I got Bruno Mars rolling around in my head, 24 Karat, and there's a couple other songs. So that's like on the 20. You were played 20 times over again until you grind it. So I thought maybe that was the case.
No, I mean, I think the songs I ended up playing on repeat. I'm a big R&B fan, and so if I find an artist, and usually it's not someone you know, but a good example also is I discovered Chris Stapleton, country singer, about 6 months ago.
Cool.
And I was obsessively listening to that. But I'll usually find a single song from an artist or something, and I'll just start to listen to that. Maybe I'll find some other stuff from them, and then I'll move on to something else completely. And again, it may just be a completely different genre. I mean, Linkin Park is alternative. Yeah. Chris Stapleton is country, and then
So when was there music at practices for Fury? I mean, was it tend to be RSB?
Yeah. So if you've ever met Slim, Slim is a Stanford grad who joined the team 2 years ago, maybe 3. The years blend together. And she carries the boombox. She carries the little. She has that Spotify playlist, and she carries that little portable boombox, and like she's the one who gets us really. She brings fire to that team, and it's really fun. She brings that energy. That as an old person, I'm like, you do that.
It's funny. It's funny how you talk about the old person. So I was able to play with this one team as a guest player. They were kind enough to let me join. It was called Donuts, and Bill Liu had.
So my girls play on that team.
Yes, she's terrific. And they call everybody's playlist onto Spotify.
Yeah.
So everybody's there, and then the track, the music. I said, this is a great track, and like Bill's like, everybody puts in. It's a collaborative effort. I'm like, I like this. Yeah. And it was like a really cool one of the coolest playlists. And I'm like, that was a real big sales fist for Spotify, and really sort of congealed the team.
I'm terrible with technology. I was
That's fine.
I'm terrible with technology. I can turn the dial on my car, which I'm in a lot. And that's about it.
That's fine. But yes, that is very interesting. Sometimes music comes into play, so I'm always curious. So I want to ask you to go back about analytics. And so we talked about a lot of qualitative stuff. Do you see analytics playing any part of observing trends or coaching? Does analytics happen in Fury? Does it happen with Pie Queens, or do you see it?
I'm trying to remember the name of the app that was designed, and we were using it in 2000. It had to be while I was injured, so maybe 2012, 2013. We were using this app where you were tracking, and I think actually Riot still uses it. Maybe they don't. But it was an app where you could track movement of players, and you actually plotted that information in. You'd plot the turnover, you'd plot the direction, you'd kind of generally be like, where did this player go, what the angle, and then you could look at it later. I think we gave it to Maddie and to Nancy's son, and I don't think anything ever. I'm not sure what came of it, to be honest.
So let me ask you: is there, aside from like turnovers, the stereotypical thing that you would make, what is a micro analytics you think would be interesting to observe to see how a person? Because interesting, like Billy Ball. They were looking for micro trends that really dictated people under the below the waterline. That's like these actually impact the game.
Yeah, but see, the baseball is so much different. I mean,
I didn't know if Ultimate could be translated.
Well, I mean, because there's so many people who talk about soccer, and I think soccer might be the best way to talk to offer a comparative view of analytics. Football has its own analytics of like 40-yard dash and like number of like chest push-up things, but those analytics don't actually tell you much, right? They tell you someone has a great one-directional speed. Sometimes with the combine stuff, you can talk about great change of direction. But what does that tell you about their ability to work with other individuals? Not actually much. I mean, there was a good period of time, and I think we're still doing it with like the tryouts for like MLU and stuff, or at least or AUL and a bunch of the other things, where in the years past we were doing like the jump test, the 40-yard dash test. But I'm of the opinion, and I may be in the minority of it, that I don't think it actually tells you that much about a player.
And there's a dispute that this doesn't translate directly to football or whatever, because we don't do that.
Yeah.
They're trying to gauge something.
Right, and I respect the idea. I mean, but it's the same argument I have with the SATs. What is the SATs really telling you about a high school student? Not much, other than they can take a test. I think soccer, when you look at that, there's some question of maybe some of those analytics could work, because soccer is doing these things like touch percentages, like what is your percentage of like when you have the ball you're going to throw a pass that's completed versus a pass that's not completed. And I think that might be interesting analytics to tell you as well, but again, soccer is also different because most of your passes aren't contested versus Ultimate. A lot of your passes will be contested. So if you're talking about completion percentage, are you talking about that you're throwing to their best defender and their best defender is playing great D, or are you talking about, I can throw in the wind? These are factors that I think analytics don't necessarily tell you about. Again, I'm a lawyer. This is not my field.
No, but here's the thing: is that you play long enough, you have a certain amount of opinions. Maybe you don't have it in analytics. It might be about coaching or something. But I'm just curious because some people are like, you know what, I've always thought this was skewed. You're talking about the combine and the type of stuff that measured. It doesn't directly relate to performance. So I'm just curious. So one of the stats I don't know how it would do is like the amount of time the person gets scored on. You know, if you never get scored on, is that a good thing for a team, or does it translate to like, well, there's other factors? Of course, you never got scored on, but is that a good thing for a defensive player to go, no one scored on me throughout this whole tournament? Is that a good stat?
I mean, it depends on who you're taking. It depends on who you're guarding, right?
Sure.
You know, if you want to guard a woman like Sturge, and I'm going to tell you that you can be one of the best defenders in the world, Sturge is still going to find a way to score. Mm-hmm. You know, this is an offensive-oriented sport, like most sports. It's maybe based not baseball, but this is an offensive-oriented sport. So again, if you're talking about analytics of trying to be able to judge what a good defender is, I'm of the opinion that a good defender should take away that player's first preference. That's what you can do. Because if you can force a player out of their first preference, force them into their second and third options, that is great defense.
Yeah, that's good. And that's not well put. That's how.
Yeah. And so, you know, as I said, I when I watch the sport, when I watch my girls, when I talk about doing tryouts and stuff, I don't think my notes don't have, you know, these objective, I guess, metrics. Mm-hmm. My notes are, wow, I think she works really well with this person. But again, I'm also a college coach where I'm constantly trying to figure out, especially when we're talking about two teams, because we have a Tarts team and the Pie Queens. We're talking about creating two programs. A lot of what I'm thinking about as a coach when we're talking about splitting those teams is how are these people going to work well together? Because you can have a very skilled player, but if you don't know where to use them, that's problematic. Sure. Or you either have to then reevaluate your offense around that player, which you can do, and I've done that with the Pie Queens as well, where I've revamped offenses based on the personnel that I have, or you can take people based on what the offensive scheme that you want to run, and then pick in, like, fill in the cogs.
Makes sense
as well.
Sure. But that's all qualitative.
Yeah.
So and that's fine. I mean, it's some coaches like it's a gut. I look at the array of situations. I've got a lot of mental metrics in my head. They're all qualitative, and you're able to do that way. So that's fine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I see people doing ticks and stuff like that, and I'm like, do you go back? Are you finding trends? And you're trying to find trends.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was that one or two exploitable things. Like, we never thought about that. So that's fine.
I don't think I can offer to be the voice on that. I think
Why
this is
invite her? I just don't know. I thought I was going to do something deep and existential, but what do you get?
Really?
Okay.
I feel like that's all we're doing.
Well, we are. That's actually, we can go light, but yes, absolutely.
I think your battery's going to die.
We have about 10%, and we're about to go. So we can almost wrap up. Closing thoughts. I just want to say pro sports for women.
I would love that. I would. I understand the economics problem, but I also want Frisbee to get promoted, and so I will take it in any form we can take right now. And I am sincerely of the opinion that we have built a community that respects and appreciates the women that are part of it.
Absolutely.
And so I am hopeful that wherever the direction this sport goes, that pro or not, that we continue to build on that character of community that we have.
I love it. And my thing, just object, I love women who come out and play amongst the men, and they're in there in the mix. So trucking women and concussions, this is like an open-ended topic.
Oh.
Don't do it. It's happening more. Does it add cachet to the sport?
Don't hurt women.
With
don't
9%, with 9% charge of the battery, I get into a deep topic.
Yeah. Don't hurt people. I think that this is going to be a discussion that we're going to have more and more as the sport becomes more physical. And I think that is it. And you say it with football as well. Football hit a point where they're like, we need to rail this back. Right. And now people are talking about, what a pansy, exactly. Fill in your blank word, sport now. Frisbee is running into that problem as well, that as we become more physical in our play, we are going to have more injury. And then the question will become, what do we do to prevent it?
Right.
And I think that process is starting already. These concussion protocols have obviously been put in place, but there's still this question of, like, especially when you're dealing with co-ed, what level of physicality is appropriate, and I think we're still figuring that answer out.
I tell my players, don't truck. I don't care. Don't go. I mean, you can tip it out, err on the side of like longevity of both parties. At the higher level, it would be a different approach. But I'm respecting life in this particular way. Like, do not take out a woman to get a highlight shot. Don't do it.
Don't take out a dude either.
Don't take out a dude. But it's but there's you get tall guys trucking women. You're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but I mean, don't truck anyone.
There you go. Thank you very much. Thanks for clarifying that. So I want to thank Slap for joining me. It was really spur of the moment. I've been trying to put this together, and she's been gracious enough to really spin on a dime and come and talk about this. There are other topics I'd love to talk about with Slap, and hopefully we'll get another chance down the road.
Can't afford my billing rate.
Ouch. But yes, down the road we'll revisit this more. But I really want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It was awesome. I was joining some PBR. She was enjoying off screen. She was a Diet Pepsi, and it was delicious. And but I want to thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next installment of Scooberlicious.
Peace out.
Take it easy.